What's happening, everybody? Welcome to another video. Evans here, and as you can see, today we have a few guests. Yes, there is Baloo right here, very eager to be on the shot. We have Duke, who's probably sitting down here. I'm not sure if you can see him, and my wife Brenna. How you doing, babe?
I'm good.
So this is the first video together, and it's a topic that I felt was necessary for her to be around for. We are talking, as you probably already know, about long distance relationships, and that is something we both had to go through. Mm-hmm. And if I just start from my side, if you had asked me 2016, 2014 to around 2018 before we met about what my take was on long distance relationships, I would have been, get the fuck out of here. Because I was a little bit cocky, I would say that for sure. And I also felt there was no need to waste time trying to get to know somebody who lives far away until when that person actually shows up and you're like, oh shit.
I feel like for me, I had already had long distance relationships and I'd already experienced them, but none of which that ended in a goal oriented towards like long term, let's join, let's cohabitate.
Yeah.
It was just like, let's keep this is a healthy distance for us. Let's just do this as long as we can. And then they were very deep relationships. It just was not, we weren't aiming towards anything profound.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads us to what this video is going to be about. At the very end, we'll talk about how to make long distance relationships work. Also, there's some kind of guidelines that I feel we should follow, which we have put them in terms of questions that will determine if you're ready, if you should even entertain a long distance relationship. We're also going to look at some struggles that always going to be there when you introduce these geographical distance or geographical barriers. We are also going to talk about, believe it or not, some of the benefits, because I think there's a silver lining to everything, which she sometimes likes to disagree.
Stay on topic. There's a whole nother video.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that. But just to define long distance relationships, the way I look at that, it's a relationship where there's significant geographical barrier, geographical distance between two people who want to make something work.
I would also add to that, I think long distance is similar to what you're saying in distance. Yeah. Time also orients kind of the same way. So if I lived an hour away from somebody, but it was if there were two cities in between and it was something that kept us away from each other, say for 2 weeks or for 3 weeks or up to a month. So I don't know that it's all about the distance, but I think that time is one of the variables that kind of equates to having a long distance.
So there's a lot of effort, which can be
a lot of effort and a lot of planning. Time. Yeah.
Okay. With that being said, I feel like our experience, which is I was in Vancouver, BC, you were in Portland, and it became something that we kind of knew almost from the get-go that we liked one another. We went heavy like with one another.
But we must preface, the reason why it was so different was because we knew exactly what we were looking for. And I think that anybody getting into a relationship, that's like a pre-qualification to dating long distance. Yes. So like even before we get into it, I know that's not something we're talking about today, but you say to a lot of people, regardless, you think you're ready for a relationship, know what you want. So this is why I think it worked so well for us, because that was a huge qualifier for both of us.
So what I'm hearing is once you know the values that you want and you see those values being embodied in somebody else, it becomes a lot easier to say, maybe it's a good thing to invest in this or to see how this can go to.
Yeah, I mean, you really know who you are. So we're going to get into how much you have to dedicate to making something like long distance work. Like you better know who you are or have some kind of guidepost, because right away you were like, this is my list. Do you qualify for my list? And I was like, well, hold on. This is my list. Let's compare.
Yeah. So let's get into that.
There.
Let's get into that. To me, I have there's some questions that I feel before anybody gets in a long distance relationship, they should have at least answered either for themselves or together with the person they're considering getting that relationship with. And to start this off, it could be something like, do you see a forever with this person? And by that, we mean do you see the values that you have being aligned with the other person. A good example for me, it was somebody who is growth oriented. And when we met, we started talking, and it was very clear from the get-go that you were not somebody who sits back and says, somebody come rescue me. And I saw that in you, and I was like, oh, she checks that. Just having those values and seeing that there is a future. I don't want to say, I say it as a forever, but
yeah, you're highly optimistic, and that's beautiful.
Yeah.
But I think that the way that I would say that is, how effortless does this feel? How much energy am I feeling off of this person? Is he starting to suck energy from me, like, immediately? And I think that there's something about eye contact and body language and how honest does this feel? And I think that falls back into that, how effortless, how foundational, what is there, like a deep, really rhythmic vibration to this? And I'm the feeler, so I'm like, how's this feel?
And I like
and you're
the
like,
reason-
does this math make sense? But that's okay. But I think that for me, that's the what can I imagine?
Yes.
What does this feel like? Could I? And just like I, mentioned the last 24 hours to our friends who were just here for coffee, and they, I said you should always be going up the staircase. At no point should you be feeling like, oh well, bringing all this good stuff to the table. Met you. We happened relatively quickly, but in that amount of time, it was everything, every box that we were checking.
Yeah.
We were making huge efforts to communicate about things that people don't communicate too quickly about at the beginning, unless you're thinking about long distance. It's like, you got to get it out quick, because I got to go. I got a train to catch. I got a plane to catch.
So having that, so what I'm hearing is some people will look at it from, let's say, a more logical standpoint, and others will approach it from a more, how does this feel to me?
Yeah.
And does this feel aligned with the future that I'm looking forward to having?
Yeah.
The second question that I feel should always, and this one must be answered by both of you, is one or both of you willing to move to make this relationship work?
And you don't know that right away, right? But
over time, I feel once you're, let's say, months into a relationship, at some point the relationship is about you two being physically in the same space and area. The way I think is one of you willing to move to the other person's city or place of residence, or you both move to a city that you feel like you will prosper or you'll have a good life, essentially.
But that also, you're also asking at the same time, am I willing to live with this person when we come together in the same city?
Yeah.
And so to that, I would say that there are a few things on my checklist. Like, you didn't know that I was peeping things, but like, I will go in and I will see how stained your white shirts are and whether or not your white socks look like you've been walking around in the mud. And what does the kitchen look like? And do you have toilet paper in the bathroom? Like, those are huge things for, I think, anybody. Like, I expect you to do the same thing. If you're looking at my spot and we're miles and miles away, like, you have to really be diligent about observing. You got to take it all in real quick. And it was even like, how cleanly was your car was probably the first thing that I saw, because you dropped me back off to the Airbnb the first evening that we met, and that had something to do with it. So you got to take it all in.
Keep your car clean, gentlemen.
You got to take it all in. Yeah.
If you're starting to see someone and you go visit them at their place for the first time and you see certain habits, like cleanliness levels,
Absolutely.
If you're content with how you're finding that person in their own comfortable areas, then that's a yes to kind of moving in together, either in a new space or kind of one of you moving to the other person's. But it also says that if somebody's not clean, don't expect them to change their behaviors.
Oh, whole nother video.
Once they move
whole
into
nother
your
video.
space.
Yeah, there is no changing people.
Yeah.
And that was another one of the preface to like the whole topic.
Don't feel like somebody's going to change.
Don't, and it's, how does this feel? How effortless is this? All of that comes back around, because you don't say, oh, I could deal with that. That's something I can deal with. That, to me, that doesn't feel as effortless as I need it to feel. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So,
all right.
keep going.
So that's the second question there. The third is one of you willing to travel to the other person more than that, more than the other? Again, a good example in our scenario is you have a daughter who was a teenager. She was 13 or something at that point, and she was in school. And it's one of those scenarios where you couldn't just leave from the middle of the week to the weekend when she still had to go back and forth to school. So that was our scenario. And some people might find that maybe the other person is more constrained with their situation, that you might have to move to kind of travel to that person more than the other. You can communicate with your partner and establish, say, hey, we don't want resentment to start creeping in here because one of you feels like they're going to the other person more than the other.
Yeah, I think that, again, like this might have to be a series because you bring kids into long distance. Like, I had to be so careful and so planned. And I was really asking myself, do you have the capacity? So needing to visit me from your long distance location, but then baking in, are you willing to see every boundary that I've set around my child?
Yeah.
You didn't stay in my space. You got an Airbnb the first time you came to visit me.
First trip down, it was an Airbnb.
And I was watching, how are you treating other people's belongings? How are you treating the environment? Are you clean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not around to see whether or not you're skipping showers. Like, all of that stuff matters so much.
Yeah.
That's why I say it's so important to make sure that it feels effortless when you're still in the test phase, basically. Like when you're in beta.
When your relationship is in beta mode.
When you're in beta, like you're 1.0. No. Okay. And then you decide to move in together and you get that update.
Yeah.
And then, you have you fully test beta.
The last two questions that I think we should also include in this here is, how is your work life going to be disrupted, and how are your finances going to be disrupted?
That's huge. Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
And can you afford that disruption in your life right now?
Yeah.
Let's say if you're a person who is working minimum wage, who's earning minimum wage right now, and you start seeing somebody long distance, you are barely even paying your rent or making your ends meet, and then you're introducing someone in your life who you have to fly to. Can you actually afford that? And is your work willing to give you, let's say, that 1 week off? Because some people have to work every week in order to make ends meet. And introducing that long distance relationship, again, just adds extra toll on that financial burden that you might already have.
I would say, please, adult. Because if you start with people and their money and their well-being, and you yourself are just like, oh, well, yeah, I met this guy and he's amazing. I mean, I'm not really set up for this and I can't dedicate the time it's going to need, but he's showing me he wants to, so I'm going to let him. Like, no. Yeah. When someone's money and time, something they value more than anything, gets involved, both people better be very honest and very serious.
So they should let each other know, say, hey, this is my situation, depending on how...
Yeah, but don't skew it,
my finances are. I might not be able to come to you. I might only be able to visit you once or twice a year. I know people have made that work where they've only seen each other like twice in a year.
Yeah, people who contract overseas and such, and just being totally honest. And you know what? If the end of the day, if they don't want that, if they don't want your truth,
then it's not the right situation for you. Okay. The last question is, can you create a situation where you have your own life in this new city? Because I've seen a lot of times where people will, let's say, I moved to Portland and my entire life gets focused around the relationship, that it suffocates everything. Which is something we'll talk about it later on. And I do not have another life outside of a relationship. Can you find your own community outside of your partner in this new space that you might move to?
I would encourage folks not to dive headfirst into each other. That's called infatuation.
Sometimes it can be toxic too, when somebody knows that you have no other support system in the new city, and you're left depending on them for everything, especially when it comes to emotional needs. That can be pretty toxic. So from a woman's perspective, what are the questions that you would have?
When I say I have one more because I'm a woman, it applies to everyone.
Got it.
Safety is so important for women, especially if we fall into infatuation. I think that it is absolutely okay to do background checks and Google checks and all the checks that you need to feel okay. When I sat with you, it was actually really important to me that I saw that you had a legitimate social presence that had built over time, that you had pictures with your friends. That really moved how I felt about you being a legit prospect in my eyes. It was very, very helpful. So paying attention to, because we get pinged by fake accounts constantly, people trying to pull us. They just come out of the woodwork. So I would just say that there are lists online that women can reference when like, what do I check? What do I check? And women, I encourage all people to feel safe, but women need to pay extra attention to making sure that they have backup plans. It seems like the BS only happens in the movies. It's so real, and it can happen anywhere. So absolutely have your backup plans. Absolutely let people know where you are, because just because long distance worked for us really quick, we have this incredibly romantic story that inspires other people. I wouldn't expect it to work for other people the way it worked for us.
Got it.
And I would be incredibly weary. Yeah, I don't know how, with this, we had some magic and it was wonderful, but I do want to also add that we got really lucky. I have been in some really unsafe situations, and it makes me want to say safety is an absolute must throughout this whole process.
Okay, so there's something that I've heard for the first time there, which is if you have validation from other people, let's say you have your own social presence, is it more like other people have vetted you, so now you're kind of a safe option?
It's just like sitting down and having like reading somebody's body language, somebody's social presence, because it's so common now, is essential. Yeah, I would think that it's like co-validation. It's the validation of friends and what you're into, but seeing that maybe if you'd like to fish, you've been fishing for the last couple of years and you fish with people and they're the same people again. Like it actually is really meaningful.
Okay. Now that we have kind of set the groundwork for what are the questions, what are the things you should consider before even entertaining a long distance relationship, let's look at some of the struggles. And my own personal ones, I have written 3. You could add some more there if you have any. Number 1 is long distance relationships can be really expensive, where